from Eric Blake. Hail, honest William Whittle, end of the fair and noble day, Earl of the fair and noble daywalkers that dwelleth in the town of Tinsel. Well met. How now? What's your opinion on the No Fear Shakespeare translations of his plays into modern English? I'm not terribly familiar with them. I've got a pretty good idea what they're like. I think if you're going to put Shakespeare in modern English, and by the way, I've given it enormous thought. I've damn near sat down and wrote Hamlet's soliloquy in modern slang as close as I could get it. You know? I mean, if a millennial were to say that, the first things out of his mouth would be FML, you know? Honestly. This is just effed up. I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna off myself. I mean, really, it's nothing to live for, and life is miserable, and I don't see any reason to go on except, you know, then what? Maybe we'll all go to hell, and maybe things will be worse, you know. And maybe just the fact that I don't have the guts to do it is why I'm trying to talk myself out of it. Basically the speech. So I think when you have people talking about doing Shakespeare in modern English, you are basically hoping to get people on board who wouldn't be on board otherwise with the ideas of the plays, but without the language of the plays. And I think that it is better than nothing, but not nearly so good as a good actor who does Shakespeare, not necessarily in original pronunciation, because that's actually sometimes very hard to understand because it's early modern English. But as I said at the very beginning of this, when you see Shakespeare acted, the motivations become very, very clear and effortless. And you quickly lose the language. You quickly lose the language as a sense of being a barrier. Now, of course, you have to have a little bit of a vocabulary to understand it. I suppose there's a world which I would probably choose where in certain circumstances I might substitute a word or two for words that people simply don't know. Welkin was a word that I didn't know. I think, was it welkin? Yeah, I'd never heard the term before. But Shakespeare uses it, I want to say, in Titus Andronicus, or what's the other one? Coriolanus. Actually, I was saying earlier it was Titus Andronicus I like so much. It's actually Coriolanus I like so much. And could so relate to. But in any event, they were talking about welkin, which means the sky or heavens, and so on. I'm a little reluctant to go halfway. I mean, as somebody just pointed out in the comment section, as I mentioned earlier, if you're going to take the language out of Shakespeare and just keep the plot, then take it all and do West Side Story, which was excellent. For those of you that don't know, West Side Story is precisely the story of Romeo and Juliet. Instead of the Montagues and the Capulets, you got the Sharks and the Jets. You've got two young people from warring gangs who fall in love with each other, and bad things happen, and it's a one-to-one modernization of Romeo and Juliet, and I think it in many ways is better than Romeo and Juliet. But there's Shakespeare without the Shakespeare. I think that's better than having Hamlet say, you know, to be or not to be. Well, I guess that's what we're asking. I don't know what the No Fear Shakespeare of Hamlet's soliloquy sounds like, but I suspect it's something like that. So yeah, you're probably getting 20% of it, 30% of it to people who maybe don't get any of it. It's an improvement over nothing, but it's not what it could be. That reading we played earlier, even though it was hard to understand the language, was acted in such a way that it was very accessible. You could see what was going on. It wasn't him declaiming, things. He wasn't simply declaiming into the air these philosophical principles, which all of us must. He was sitting down and talking to the audience as if it was a friend. He was talking to his cat or his he's just here's, well, look, this is the issue, right? I mean, what should I do? I mean, on one hand, I could do this, and on the other hand, I could do that. And I don't know. It was so immediate and personable that even if he wasn't speaking English, if you were to jumble the words and make him speak gibberish but with the same inflection, you'd still get 20 or 30% of it. So, I tend to be against these kind of things because I don't think that anybody is going to be going to see No Fear Shakespeare on their own. I don't think that people who would not go and see Shakespeare are suddenly motivated to go see No Fear Shakespeare in modern language and enjoy it. So if you're going to rope them up and hustle them into the theater, you might as well give them the full dose. That would be my answer to that, I would suppose. Filtering here. Somebody's mentioning some other guy, Clovens something, who apparently spends a lot of time talking about Shakespeare. I suspect I know who we're talking about. He's undoubtedly watching this, making notes as fast as he can. So I'm not even going to grace him or raise him, and there you go. Eric Blake writes in the comments, honestly, why set Shakespeare in modern day, but with the old language? That's going halfway, but it's not. It's not, in my opinion. So the final question, going back to the previous one on modern interpretations and so on, many productions of Shakespeare have been set in more modern eras than they were written in. The movie version of Titus Andronicus with Anthony Hopkins was interesting in that they were wearing business suits and the Goths had different kind of clothing on. And it wasn't exactly modern clothing, but it certainly wasn't togas either. I've seen versions of Shakespeare in the present day that made it more accessible because all you're changing there is you're changing the parts that aren't Shakespeare. In other words, if you do a version of Hamlet set in Germany in the 1930s or whatever, your original costume director is offended, and that's it. You've still got the same words with the same motivation, the same action, but you've got them in an environment that seems more familiar to you. This is the opposite of what No Fear Shakespeare or these modern English versions seem to be. You're taking away the words, and all it is the words. It's the words. That's it. He's not the only person who ever wrote about anger or fear or jealousy or murder or anything. He's the only person who wrote about them in such a way that he captured the essence of them because of his words, because of the words he used. Shakespeare without Shakespeare's words isn't Shakespeare. Shakespeare without Shakespeare's costumes is Shakespeare. That's my opinion on it anyway. Moving on.